Hi you guys, welcome back to The Gold and the Grit. I'm your host and Christian. Today's guest is Will Stelter. He's a skilled bladesmith and a YouTuber who's been making knives since he was 14. What started as a hobby quickly turned into a career, and now he runs his own shop, crafting high-quality blades and other fun tools, and sharing his pieces on his website. He's passionate about his faith, hunting, shooting, and always being prepared to help others. I met Will at church here in Montana, and besides being an insanely talented guy, he's just overall a solid dude. I hope you all enjoy our conversation.
Nailed it. Nice.
Let's do it. Let's go. What's up, Will?
How's it going?
Thanks for having me. This place is really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, no, glad you're here.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about this guy.
This is a 1940s Chambersburg power hammer. It has a 300-pound falling weight, and so we use it for moving around giant chunks of steel. Like the hammer on the anvil over there is a 3.5-pound hammer, and I can forge realistically like 1-inch round stock with it. And this you can forge, I'll do like 30-pound blocks of steel at a time. And so it just makes the whole process for moving big stuff a lot more efficient and a lot more consistent because everything is totally kept in line. You can keep things square really easily, whereas you have the human factor when you're swinging a hand hammer. So it's just one of the several different forging machines around here that make big industrial forging efficient and doable.
So cool. How many hours a week do you say you're working on knives or different tools or just forging?
Yeah, so it really varies week to week. So I've been doing YouTube full time for like 6 years.
Dang.
And so, yeah, I feel like I'm getting old.
No, you're not. You're not old.
But it really depends. It's anywhere from like, sometimes it's almost not at all. I do a lot of traveling to like knife shows to visit with other people, like all over the world, stuff like that. But when I'm just like a normal work week is probably about 40 to 50 hours in the shop. And some of that is video work, doing voiceover, reviewing stuff. And then, but yeah, a lot of it is just in the shop working. When I'm getting ready for a knife show, I have really hardcore ADHD, and so I procrastinate really badly. And so most knife shows that I'm getting ready for, the like 2 or 3 weeks leading up to it, I'll do like 110-hour weeks in the shop trying to get stuff done.
Oh my gosh.
But that's not the normal.
Do you like sleep in here when you're having those crazy weeks?
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Well, cool. So tell us a little bit. I know I gave a little bio, but tell us a little bit about yourself. I think you had family that were in Montana, and then you guys ended up in Washington State. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. So my grandfather was born in Billings in 1929, and then he moved to Washington when he was 14. And so my mom grew up there. She met my dad at college there. And then, I grew up there. And then a couple months after I turned 18, I moved out here to go to school and then dropped out after a year to make knives.
That was a good call.
It was a good call.
That's a really good call. Did you find that when you first started off that it was like immediately successful, or was there like a buffer period, or how did you find your first clients?
Yeah, so that same grandfather was always super supportive of me. He was really into knife sharpening when I was growing up, and so all of his kitchen knives, some of his kitchen knives were very sharp. The ones that my grandmother used, she would always cut herself with sharp knives.
Oh, no.
And so he wouldn't keep her knives very sharp. But when I started getting interested in this and started like actually building stuff, it started off rough. I was 14. No one in my family did metalworking. I didn't know anybody that did any metalworking or knife making. It all just came through internet knowledge and messing around the shop to get stuff figured out. And but I started off with probably like $150 worth of tools in my dad's garage. And then
is that Marty?
That's Marty scratching at the door. He wants to go out. And then I started kind of getting more interested in it, getting a little bit better at it, starting to build some of my own tools to make the process better. And my grandfather, I think one Christmas, gave me a knife sharpening system, basically. And so I started off sharpening knives for just around, like go door to door and ask people if they wanted their knives sharpened and take them home, and charged $1 an inch to sharpen knives. And then, yeah, paid for a lot of my shop that way. And so
That's really cool.
yeah, it was pretty dang fun. It took me a long time to actually start selling knives because they were really bad.
Really?
They were terrible. Yeah.
I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah. I mean, they wouldn't cut anything. They weren't heat treated properly. They were awful. But I started an Instagram before I even started making anything. And yeah, I think I found my first actual client, the first guy that like paid me for a knife, who wasn't like, I gave away a good couple knives to begin with, but my first actual knife client was a guy, I think over in Georgia, and I made this like tiny little knife, and he paid me $100 for it, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then it was, yeah, just finding clients online mostly, and I still mostly sell online. So
it's awesome, and your YouTube took off.
Yeah. So this shop that we're sitting in right now is a shop that I helped set up 6 years ago. My friend from England, Alex Steele, asked me to drop out of school to work with him. And so I did. I made knives for a couple of months before he got over here. And then, so when he got here, he had, I think, 1.3 million subscribers. And I hadn't really been on camera at all before that. And super awkward, but started off just like jumped into it full time, 60 hours a week or so doing YouTube. And then after 2 years, he moved back to England. I moved into my own shop and started my own channel. We had grown the channel to, I think, 2.5 million subscribers by the time he left. And then, yeah, been doing it pretty much full time-ish for the last couple of years. And yeah, my channel's at like 260,000 subscribers now. So
wow,
yeah, pretty fun.
it's a big deal. How did you meet him?
He and I met because we had a couple of mutual friends in Washington, some blacksmiths that he had actually come over from England to work with. And they were actually the first blacksmiths that I ever met. The guys that like really taught me how to forge. Jake Ferrum, he's a really good hammer maker. And then our other friend, Steve Howell, who's like the leading expert on hot rivets in the world. So like the way that like bridges used to be held together and like the Eiffel Tower and stuff like that. It's not a common thing anymore. But yeah, those guys, he saw me working with them, and he was kind of interested in doing some knife stuff, and just started asking me questions online about knife making. I had just found out who he was right before that, and we just were real similar people, and we just became really fast friends really quickly. And the first time that I met him, all I knew of him was his online presence, and then some referrals from friends. But my family went to Italy for a couple weeks in 2017. And on the way back, I flew to England and spent a week with him. So the first time I met him, I was stepping off a train in Norwich in England to spend a week with him.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and we just, clicked.
Became besties.
Yeah.
Has he come to Montana since he moved back at all to visit?
Yeah, a couple of times pretty briefly, but his wife, and he's got a bunch of dogs and stuff over there. He's pretty anchored down over there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you talked about your grandpa a lot being a big influence in your life, and I know he recently passed away, and I'm so sorry for your loss. What are some things, other than obviously this amazing craft and skill that you've made your career, has he taught you along the way? Because you guys spent a lot of time together, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any like lessons or favorite stories or memories with him?
Yeah, so he wasn't, I guess it kind of runs in our family. I'm not like no one in my family is particularly like, I guess, really articulate with phrases or sayings like my dad, my grandpa. None of them are, I guess, none of them like have phrases they say over and over again. But some of the things that really stuck with me, I remember my grandmother had gotten diagnosed with a version of Parkinson's that it's not like the shaky hands kind. It's just a degenerative brain disease. And so she just had like a downhill, pretty linear slope for a couple of years. And around the time where she was kind of stopping, like not really able to walk anymore, we were driving out to their house together, and he always, kind of like me, would really deep dive and go down rabbit holes. So he was always really passionate about fly fishing, and playing golf and flying. Those were like the three things in his life that he was like really dedicated to.
He was a pilot?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I'd very much like to give that a shot.
You should.
Mainly because of him.
You should.
Yeah.
Then you can fly yourself to all the cool knife shows all over the world.
Exactly.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. But I remember asking him, because he at that point wasn't really doing anything. He was in great shape. I think when he was like 86 or 87, he could still do pull-ups, which is crazy.
What?
Yeah. And so he was in great shape physically and mentally at that point. And I remember asking him why he didn't like go out and play golf anymore. He had like a 2 handicap for a long time. So he was like really into it. And I just remember him saying like, I like dedicated portions of my life to, fly fishing, golf, flying, all of that. But at this point, the thing that I care about the most is just loving on and taking care of your grandmother. And so I'm not going to play golf while I can spend time with her. And yeah, that's one of my strongest memories with him. And then my other one that I remember from, I probably was like 5 or 6 years old. I remember he used to practice his cast with his fly rod, and he would tie like a little piece of red yarn, and I'd stand like 50, 60 feet away from him, and he'd cast it into my like little outstretched hands. He was fantastic at it. And I just remember, I remember him involving me in something that he was really passionate about, and that was really cool.
That's special.
Yeah.
That's so special. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. So my next question, I kind of want to talk about, we met at church, obviously. Mm-hmm. So how has your faith influenced, I guess, your life decisions, your career, but also just like overall your daily decisions? And do you find that in your industry, it's kind of hard to stand up for your faith in some ways, or has that ever been a challenge for you?
In some ways, yeah. I think that, well, it's hard to, I grew up in a Christian household. I got baptized when I was 14. As a kid, it's hard to say like, that it was like my faith when, I didn't really have the choice of going to church, but I like really made that decision and started pursuing it kind of early high school. But it's been a part of my life, my entire adult life. And so it's hard to say what my life would look like without it, because I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have a hard time separating my life from my faith. Mm-hmm. And so, it affects everything in my life, every decision that I make. And it's, not always, it's habit and just unconscious at this point. Just that's, trusting God, seeking His wisdom is just the way that I live. Mm-hmm. And so, it's hard to say what life would look like without that. As far as like sharing my faith and the way that's like affected my work and like the community, the bladesmithing community is incredibly tight knit. I travel a lot, I drive a lot, I stay with people all over the world. And so I think that I don't have a hard time sharing my faith, and it's been really interesting because I've gotten to share my faith with people because of like online clout, I guess, like people that respect me because of the work that I do, and because I guess I have a following as well, that normally would not care what I had to say. Yeah. I had a really interesting experience in South Africa like 2 years ago. Just some guy came up. We started talking about faith. He was super cool dude. I want to say he was a missionary of some sort or in a ministry. And we were just having a conversation about it. And this other guy kind of was like floating around the table a little bit. And then I forget exactly. I think I turned to him and I was like, "So man, what do you think about Jesus?" And he was a fan of mine. He'd been following me for a long time. And we just got to have a conversation with this dude that I think normally would have been very not open to having that conversation. But because it was coming from me, he was like open to it. It's interesting that people's respect for me allows me to share my faith with them, when I think that normally, like that, they wouldn't care what I had to say. Yeah. But because something probably in their minds totally unrelated, they respect me, they're willing to listen. And so I've done a good bit of teaching, both knife making and then like pistol shooting. And I found out in pistol shooting that, I look really young. And so when you have like a 55-year-old dude come to a class, I found out that I kind of had to like show off a little bit at the beginning of the class, so that they'd be willing to like listen to what I had to say. Because otherwise they're like, hey, this 12-year-old kid's trying to teach me how to shoot. What does he know? And so, burn down a couple drills, show that I can draw 5 times faster and hit what I'm aiming at.
That's right. Yeah.
But with online stuff, people already know, I guess, that I care about what I have to say. But it's been cool to have that. I have found that kind of the inverse is also true, where I do have a harder time sharing my faith with people that I really respect that are really hostile to it. Like guys that I look up to in the craft. It's harder to have those conversations with them just because I think, more worldly concerned about what they think about me. I still have gotten to have those conversations, and especially, I've had a lot of really close relationships, and my best friends in the world are all knife makers, for the most part. There's a couple they're all over the world, but yeah, and obviously I have some good close friends here in town too. But yeah, I find that with my peers, it's very easy to have those conversations, and it's people from like all different walks of life. One of my good friends lives in Italy, and he's a knife maker and runs a hot air ballooning company and has a olive vineyard, or I don't know if it's a vineyard or farm or whatever.
Yeah.
But he and I have gotten to have conversations, and totally different worldview from where I'm at. And then friends in Australia, friends in Brazil, friends in South Africa, friends in the Middle East.
Wow.
It's been
all over the map.
Yeah, pretty much.
That is so cool. I think that's a really admirable trait that no matter where people are at, no matter maybe their background in like a European country where Catholicism is really big or whatever it is, that you are open to saying like, hey, here's what I believe and why. And also thanks for being vulnerable about when someone is like cooler or whatever. It is intimidating to share.
Totally. It's super embarrassing, but it totally is. I mean, there's like that dichotomy of like, I know that what happens in this life doesn't really matter. I know that it doesn't matter what people think of me in the light of eternity, but it's super easy to let it like get in your head. So it's a bummer.
Yeah. Fear of man is a snare, but it's very real.
Yeah.
I definitely struggle with that. Even like we talked this week about church, and even on that scale of like what people think even within the body, and that shouldn't matter even more, but it does.
Yeah.
And I definitely struggle too. So I think other people can relate to that for sure. So with forging, there's obviously a few different verses about like gold or silver, like the refiner's fire. I don't know if there's a verse about refiner's fire, but I think there is, maybe in Job. Have you ever like seen, or do you ever think about those parallels?
Yeah. It's funny, something that I've come to realize, and at first I was like, man, there's a lot of different like parallels between like crafting and making stuff and like things that could be, like parallels to the way that we live our lives and like faith. Like there's just a lot of sermon illustrations in crafting stuff. And I came to the realization, it's like, well, because God created all this stuff, so it is a parallel.
Yeah.
And so it very much ties together, because the same God that created relationships and created sermon illustrations is the one that created crafting and all that stuff. So it's no surprise that the whole world points to Christ.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I know, because I think about like being a malleable person, my heart being malleable, and then sometimes the Lord really has to go to work to like iron out those bits and pieces of our lives that aren't quite right yet, or we need to be shaped more, and that process is so painful. And like, how is 3.5 pound hammer? So you're taking that, using whatever strength you have, and just going at a piece of steel.
Yeah.
Like that is how life feels sometimes.
Yep. And I mean, even like the hotter that you get something, so the more intense the atmosphere of the forge, the easier it is for something to move. And so like steel goes into its plastic state and it gets softer and easier to work the harder it is, or the hotter it is. And yeah, I mean, there's a billion certain illustrations in there.
No, for real.
Yeah, there's a lot.
That is honestly really cool. What is your favorite piece, whether it's a sword or a knife, that you've ever made? And then how many hours did it take? And also, why is it your favorite?
Yeah, I'd say one of my absolute favorite things I ever built was a marshmallow roasting fork.
What?
It's like a $7,000 marshmallow roasting fork.
You sold it?
Yeah.
Wow. Was it custom? Like someone said, I want this?
No, I wanted to build it for fun. And so I took it to Blade Show 2 years ago and won an award for it.
What?
And yeah, so it's about yay long. And I forged it all out of one piece of twisted Damascus. I forged it super close to shape, which is really hard for something like that, including an integral guard and an integral butt cap on it. And then I fit some fossilized mammoth ivory scales and then carved them.
We have to get a picture of this.
Yeah, I have really good pictures of it.
We'll have to get a picture of this to show everyone, because that's crazy.
Yeah, and I probably had like 110 or 130, 40 hours into that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's more than your average knife?
Yeah, I'd say on average, probably somewhere around like 20 to 40 hours, somewhere around there. Yeah, I mean, I can make a knife in like 2 hours, but that just doesn't interest me. It doesn't like, I don't like building the same thing twice. I have hundreds of pages of sketches of things I want to build. And so the idea of building something twice just like shuts down my brain.
Another parallel.
Yeah.
It's another parallel.
Yeah.
We're all made unique.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really like digging into really finicky, detailed, challenging things. I like being able to push myself and explore new avenues in the crafting world. And I like knives a lot, but I like making almost anything. Hence the like marshmallow roasting fork or a pizza cutter or like that titanium spatula I showed you.
It's so cool.
I just like building stuff. So.
Yeah. That's what's unique about your drops too, is like they're not going to be the same. Something might look similar, but it's going to be different. Yeah. They are unique, one of a kind things. So that is what sets you apart for sure. Kind of wanting to get into something deeper, what would you say, if you could pinpoint or talk about, and obviously only share what you feel comfortable with, but would be the most challenging thing that you've walked through, not just professionally, but like personally the last like couple years or so? And what do you think you've taken away or learned from that?
I'd say the hardest thing, the thing that's like made my gut wrench the most, has been relationships. Some with women, but just like learning how to communicate well in, I guess, difficult situations. So whether that's like, it's been a lot in business. So Alec and I had like a pretty hard time for a while working together towards the end there. And we're back to being on very good footing. But like, there was a lot of like really hard conversations that we had. And then same thing with like my videographer or Matt, who's the guy that I work with in the shop here now. There's just been a lot of like, learning how to, for one thing, trust God in that. But then, just like, I mean, you know how it goes. Difficult conversations with people has been the thing that has like made my stomach turn the most. And it's been like, when I have a difficult situation, it's the time where I'll get stressed out and then I'll be like, oh, I can pray about it, and then feel the like peace and the like anxiety like wash away. I don't struggle with anxiety. I never have. I've had anxious and stressful situations or like short time periods, but I've always been able to pray about it. It's gone away like immediately.
Wow.
So that has been the thing that has, like really showed me, I guess how to trust in God. It it hasn't been super easy. It hasn't been easy when I've been trying to do it by myself and just like think through it or like get worked up about like, oh, what are they thinking? Why would they possibly be thinking like that? Like all that stuff, and then praying about it. And the other thing that I found is that like, it's so easy to get worked up, and then you have a conversation, you're like, oh, it's way less bad than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you make it out to be one thing in your head, and it's absolutely not ever that bad.
100%. Yeah. Sometimes it might be that bad, but even then, like, it's just life, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't actually matter very much.
I know. Relationships are hard though, but it's also cool to hear a man's perspective about that, because in my mind, I thought that's like a thing that, girls are just like in our heads about all the time, and we're like, conflict's really tough, but I love to hear like from a man's perspective that like it still does bother you too to have conflict, or like things aren't going perfect, or you do want to make that right and work it out. And that's cool to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not always going on in my head. It's like very specific situations. Like I'm not always thinking about it, but there are, times when conversations are coming up that need to be had that I'll. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does being a man of God look like to you? And also, how do you spend your time intentionally to grow closer to God? And what do your habits look like? What do your quiet times look like? And quiet times are just like a Christian-y term for like spending time with God, for anyone that doesn't know that, because it's a kind of silly term, but because they aren't always quiet. But what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, it almost always is very quiet. But the way that I like, the way that I spend time with God consistently is just in the morning, get up, make a cup of coffee, pray for a while, whether that's, you probably say it a dozen times a week of like, oh, that sucks, I'll pray for you about that. And so like going through, remembering those times, praying for people, praying for the situations going on. And sometimes it's like thankfulness, like we do a drop for the e-com store here and it sells out, like be thankful about that. But yeah, it's normally just like in my kitchen at like 4 or 5 a.m.
That's early.
Great. Actually, right now I haven't been waking up super early, but usually I train jiu-jitsu at like 5:30, and so I need to leave my house at like 4:45. So, in the last like 4 or 5 years, I'll go in and out of seasons of being consistent with that. Ideally, it's 7 days a week. The last like probably 2 or 3 months, I've been less consistent with it. And like, I feel it in my day-to-day life when I like wake up late and have to get out the door and like, don't spend time with God. And then as far as like what it looks like to be a man of God, it's kind of a big question. I mean, the Bible's full of what it looks like. And I do struggle with that dichotomy a little bit because, I've like trained quite a bit to be good at pistol shooting, and then training jiu-jitsu. So training for violence, but then I've also struggled with like, Christ says to turn the other cheek, but then in the Old Testament, Saul had killed his thousands, David had killed his tens of thousands. What does that look like today? What does that look like in the light of the New Testament? And so, I think, I don't know. I go back and forth on that actually. And like, even like being on the church security team, you're like, okay, if someone came into a church and was like, wanted to kill a bunch of people, pretty much everyone in there is saved and they're going to go to heaven. And the person walking through the door is definitely not saved. So is it the right thing to smoke them? Right. Or is it the right thing to let people go to heaven and be there with God? And I still haven't fully made up my mind. Where I've landed is that if I'm in submission to the Holy Spirit, I'll know what to do, whether that's to smoke somebody or to, let myself die. Paul talks about it a little bit. He's like, hey, I'd love nothing more than to die and go be in heaven right now, but my mission on earth isn't finished yet. So I'm not going to die. Yeah. It's something that plays on my mind quite a bit and that I go back and forth on. So, but I do think that it's a good thing for a man of God to be at least capable of violence, but still being a loving, compassionate, kind person. Yeah.
I think that was literally, the perfect way to put it. And then what does it say about Jesus? He was full of grace and full of truth.
Mm-hmm.
So it is like a both.
Yeah.
So like being capable of, if you need to do that, you know how, and you're training for it, you're prepared, especially one day if you're a husband and a dad, like you're going to want to be able to protect your family.
Yep.
That's going to be your first and foremost, priority and goal is to be a protector and provider. And so I think that's a great thing to be prepared for both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we see Christ in the New Testament being, he did flip over tables and whip people in the temple, which is awesome and kind of hilarious. But then he was also super loving, super kind. But then we see him in Revelation in like chapter 19, shows up, robe dipped in blood, tattoos on his legs.
On a horse.
On a white horse.
Let's go.
Yeah. Eyes like fire, double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. So he's like, obviously, God did create violence, and it is a tool, not necessarily something to be used all the time, but it's not necessarily, violence isn't necessarily like a bad thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
In the right context, in the right way.
Yep.
I'm with you on that. Very cool. So, wait, one more question before I end it with my final question. What's your favorite trade knife show you've been to all over the country, and why?
I think that my favorite one is the Blade Show in Atlanta. I've gone to it for the last like 6 or 7 years now. It's the biggest knife show in the world, and so I get to see friends from all over the world that I don't only get to see once a year, and it's just like a 3-day reunion basically. It's like not even necessarily about selling knives. I just enjoy getting to see all my homies,
all your besties.
Pretty much, yeah. It's cool to see the things that people come up with throughout the year, the best knives that people create throughout the year. They bring to Blade Show for the most part. So it's cool to get to like see the best of the best, and then get to hang out and smoke cigars and just enjoy the cool people. Bladesmiths are generally really, really interesting people. The people that get to be like a very high level in bladesmithing usually are really good at something else. That's just like a common trait that I found among almost every good knife maker is they're usually like really high level at something else. And so they're just super interesting people to get to talk to and hang out with. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's how you find all your best friends, or most of them. Where do you see your career heading? And then long term, like obviously I know you want to keep doing this, but I have an inkling that you also like have a different mission in mind too, that you want to maybe use it towards your what's like your long-term goal with your career, but also just your life?
Yeah. So I think that I will always make custom knives, but the project that I'm working on right now is Stelter Manufacturing. So this shop is where we're doing all that stuff out of. And so it's things like those ashtrays and bottle openers and these little production knives and stuff like that, where, not everyone can afford a $2,500 knife, but most people can swing a $300 knife, which to me seems really cheap. I know that's not,
now it does.
Yeah, I know that's not the general consensus, but that's like a budget knife in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of dreams and ideas of where I'd like it to go. Ideally, and one of the missions that I have with like the YouTube channel is like educating people about forging and crafting stuff. It's just a really cool process. It's really fun to watch. And so I enjoy getting to share that with people. And I've had all kinds of ideas for like a school, for like more of like a dude ranch, but with blacksmithing and industrial forging involved in some way.
You should be a farrier, Will, on the side.
Oh no! Oh man! Well, maybe at some point
for your own horses.
Yeah.
And maybe for Marty.
Yeah.
Do you want some horseshoes, Marty?
Probably. But I kind of have a hard time with trying to plan out my life because ultimately it's not up to me.
That's right.
And so like, I don't really see a whole lot of point in being like, oh, hey, here's where I'd like to be in like 20 years. Like I'd love to be, a father, and married goes along with that ideally. And, like those I've wanted to be a husband and a dad since I was like a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I do think that like, I don't think that God puts that desire on people's hearts and then like doesn't fulfill it. Like, I don't think that's like a bad desire, and I don't think that he gives that desire to people. Yeah. Anyway, but
Same page. Yeah.
yeah. But as far as a life plan, I don't have one because I trust that I'll be able to follow along with whatever God has planned.
It's so good.
So
yeah, and it's worked out perfectly so far for you. So makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that answer. Yeah, I think it's wise to like have, like you said, dreams, desires, and goals without being like attached to them and being like, this has to happen, and if this doesn't happen, then
yeah. I think that a lot of times people will come up with a plan and then ask God to fulfill it for them, and then if it doesn't happen, they get angry with God, and that's not fair or cool or biblical. So, yeah.
It is none of those things, especially cool.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question I typically end with, actually I've only ended with, if you could go back and look at Will at any given age in the eyes and tell him one thing that you know now, what would you go and say, and at what age?
Oh my. It's a good question. I don't know. Apart from like a super generic, like going back to early teen Will and telling him to follow God. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, like I said, no one in my family is particularly like
It's okay.
philosophical.
It's all right.
And I fall into that same category. I think that just telling my younger self to follow God and not let the desires and the things of the world to influence me the way that it did when I was in early high school and stuff like that. That was probably the time that I was like, I was fairly new to like actually pursuing Christ, and it was very much like I let myself be influenced by friends and pursue not great things. So yeah.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Even not in my teenage years, I've been there, and yeah, it's never worth it as much as we think it will be.
No, it's super unfulfilling.
Yeah.
And bad for you.
Yeah. Not only that, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those fun details about your life, about your career, your hopes and for your future, and you do have a lot of wisdom. You don't have to be a philosopher to have wisdom. You do have a lot of wisdom. So thank you for sharing that too.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.